1 year ago, I stood in this room on our trial Shabbat, Shabbat Acharei 2019, and this week we'll be reading as the second of our two parashiyot, Kedoshim, once again. It's amazing to think where a year has gone. It's unbelievable to us how many people we've got to know in Pinna, how at home we feel here, and how much our world has changed in such a short space of time. We could feel a little bit downhearted to think where we are just a year from that trial Shabbat. But the truth is, I read a Midrash this week. I came across a teaching of our sages, which I'd like to share with you, and it uplifted me tremendously. In Kedoshim, Moshe is preparing the Jewish people to enter into the land of Israel. And as part of those preparations, he tells them, Ki tavo el haaretz, when you come to the land, unatatem kol eitz ma'achal, and you plant any fruit trees, then this is what you're going to do. Here is a few laws which you have to bear in mind when you plant fruit trees within the land of Israel. And the simple way of reading that verse is to understand it as when you come to the land of Israel, you may choose to plant fruit trees, and this is what you have to do if you end up planting those fruit trees. But this is what the Midrash says. The Midrash asks the following question. Torah tells us that we should try and follow God. We should try and follow in His ways. We should try and follow His path. We should try and cleave to God. We should try and cling to Him, to come close to Him. And the Midrash asks, how is it possible? How is it possible to follow a God who is infinite? How is it possible to cling to a God who is purely divine, who is purely spiritual, when we are such physical, mortal beings? And the Midrash answers that all we need to do is to emulate His ways, is to follow what He does. Now, what is it that the Almighty does? The Midrash says, as the world began, God made Himself busy planting trees. In the Garden of Eden, He ensured that there would be fruit trees for the world to enjoy. And then quotes the verse from our parasha, just as God planted fruit trees, when you enter the land, it is not an option to plant fruit trees. Unatatem kol etz ma'achal. You should go out of your way to try and plant fruit trees. Now, if this would have been written by a modern scholar, I'd have said that they'd have been sponsored by the JNF to say this. But this Midrash was written 2,000 years ago. Now, what exactly is this Midrash teaching us? Talmud tells us the story of Choni HaMa'agel, Choni, the circle drawer. Now, one day he was wandering along and he saw an old man planting a tree, a carob tree. He asked the man, how long do you think it will be before this tree is ready to give you some fruit to eat? The man responded to him, I think it'll take about 70 years before the fruit is ready. Choni looked at him and said, do you really believe that you're going to be here in 70 years to eat the fruit of this tree? And the old man responded beautifully, I entered into this world and there were fruit trees already prepared for me to eat from. I am simply ensuring that in the next generation, my children and my grandchildren will also have fruit trees ready for them to eat from. When the Torah teaches us plant fruit trees, to emulate the Almighty, to plant those trees as God did in the Garden of Eden, it is not simply about planting trees in the land of Israel. It is about investing in the future of the Jewish people. It is about believing in the future of this world. It is about recognizing that a tree may take 70 years, may take 1 year, may take 2 years, but it may take 70 years, it may take even longer for us to see the fruits of what we do in this world. But ultimately, our belief in the future of this world, our belief in a better tomorrow than we have today, is why we plant trees and why we invest in the future, why we invest in our children, why we invest in our grandchildren, and why we invest in ourselves. There are two contexts in which our sages use the analogy of planting. Number one is in raising the next generation, in nurturing the growth of children within our community and the wider world. And the second is within our own character traits, to water our character traits, to focus on them, even though we may not see the fruits of that today. To exercise patience, to exercise kindness, to instill within ourselves Jewish values may take time for us to see the fruits of our labors. But it is like planting trees. It is about investing in the future. And in a time when the world seems to be a little bit bleak, when things seem to be a little bit challenging, we have to remember that planting trees is not about today. It's about remembering and believing in tomorrow. What the Midrash in Kedoshim is telling us is that to be like the Almighty, we have to believe that the world can be better than it is now. And we have to invest in that belief. We have to make time to ensure that that will be so. Please God, we look forward to returning to this shul and to making sure that our future is brighter than it ever has been before. Shabbat Shalom.